The morning sun rose over London, painting Westminster Abbey in soft gold. The old stone walls seemed to glow under the clear sky. Outside the grand building, a large crowd had gathered. People stood behind the barriers, some waving flags, others holding cameras. The air was filled with excitement and pride. Police officers stood at every corner. Photographers waited with their lenses ready. They hoped to capture the perfect moment from this special day. News reporters whispered into their microphones, giving updates to viewers at home. Inside the Abbey, everything was ready. Hundreds of chairs were placed in perfect rows, all facing the grand altar. On each chair lay a small white program with the day's order of service written in elegant letters. The smell of polished wood and fresh flowers filled the air. The stained glass windows let in beams of colored light, which danced across the stone floor. This was a day to honor military veterans, men and women who had served their country with great courage. Many veterans had traveled from far places to attend. Some walked with canes, some were in wheelchairs, but all wore their medals proudly. This was their day of remembrance. A black car stopped at the Abbey's front. The door opened, and Princess Kate stepped out. She wore a beautiful navy blue dress. Her hair was styled simply but perfectly. She looked at the crowd. A warm smile spread across her face. The people cheered softly as she walked gracefully up the stone steps and through the large wooden doors. Inside the Abbey, the soft sound of an organ filled the air. The high stone arches seemed to hold centuries of history. Kate paused for a moment, taking in the beauty and calm of the place. Then she walked slowly down the center aisle. As she passed, she greeted people with gentle nods and kind smiles. Many veterans looked up at her with admiration and respect. Princess Kate was known for her kindness. She often visited military hospitals and spoke with veterans. She truly cared about their stories and sacrifices. Many in the Abbey knew this and felt honored to have her there. In the front row sat the royal family. King Charles wore his military uniform with shining medals. Other royal members were seated beside him, each in formal dress. Palace staff made sure everything ran smoothly. Cameras were placed at different spots, ready to capture every important moment. The Archbishop of Canterbury entered in his ceremonial robes. He stood at the podium and welcomed everyone. His deep voice echoed through the Abbey. He spoke of bravery, sacrifice, and honor. The audience listened quietly, their faces filled with emotion. Military guards stood near the altar there, uniforms crisp and their shoes shining. A band of musicians sat ready, their instruments polished and gleaming. Everything had been planned carefully. The program would follow royal tradition from start to finish, yet no one knew that something unexpected would soon touch every heart. In the Abbey, as the Archbishop spoke, Princess Kate looked around at the sea of faces. She saw proud veterans sitting tall, some with their families beside them. Children sat quietly, wide-eyed at the grand ceremony. The Abbey was filled with respect and gratitude, but then, in the third row, something caught Kate's attention. A small detail that seemed out of place. Feelings stirred in her heart. Something was different here. Though the ceremony followed a strict plan, soon one quiet moment would change everything. Princess Kate sat quietly in her seat. Her navy blue dress flowed softly around her. Her hands rested gently on her lap, around her. The sounds of the royal ceremony filled the great Abbey. The Archbishop's voice echoed through the stone arches. The band played softly in the background. Kate looked around the room once again. Veterans sat proudly with their medals shining. Families sat beside them, some holding hands. The royal family remained perfectly still, watching the altar. The cameras continued to record each moment for people around the world, but Kate's eyes were drawn again to the third row. There, an elderly man sat, looking different from the others. While most of the veterans sat tall and proud, this man was hunched over. His shoulders shook slightly as if he were holding back strong emotions. He wore an old dark suit, well cared for but worn with age. His white hair was neatly combed. His hands, spotted with age, were strong but trembling. He held something small in his hands. Kate leaned forward slightly to see it better. It was a small, faded photograph. The old man would look down at the photo, then up at the altar, then back again. Tears rolled slowly down his cheeks. He wiped them away carefully with a handkerchief. His lips moved silently, as if he were speaking to someone unseen. Kate's heart tightened. Gosh, she could see his pain. Even in such a grand and formal place, this man's quiet sorrow stood out. The princess had always been known for noticing when someone was in need. Even now, in the middle of a royal event, her heart reached out to the man in the third row. Around him, the other guests seemed unaware. They listened to the archbishop or watched the ceremony. No one seemed to notice the old man's quiet grief, but Kate could not look away. She wondered about the photograph. It looked worn, as if it had been held many times over many years. The image was hard to see from a distance, but it looked like the face of a young man in uniform. A soldier, perhaps. Maybe someone the old man had lost. Kate's mind filled with questions. Was this his son? A brother? A friend? What memories did this photo hold? Why had he brought it today to this royal ceremony of honor? The princess felt her heart grow heavy. This was a day of remembrance, but for this man it was clearly more than that. His pain was fresh, real, and deep. She glanced at the king, sitting. Nearby, the monarch's gaze was fixed on the altar. The other royals sat perfectly still, their expressions calm and formal. None had noticed what Kate now saw so clearly. The princess's fingers curled slightly in her lap. She wanted to do something, but what? This was a grand and formal event. Every part of the ceremony was carefully planned. There was no place for unscripted actions, yet Kate's eyes kept returning to the old man. His sorrow was a quiet cry, unnoticed by others but impossible for her to ignore. The music swelled again. The archbishop prepared for the next part of the service. Around her, everything seemed as it should be. Deep inside, Kate knew something had to be done. The ceremony moved forward in the grand abbey. The choir sang softly. The archbishop spoke words of honor and respect. The audience sat quietly, their faces full of pride. Princess Kate sat in her seat, but her thoughts were with the old man in the third row. His quiet tears and trembling hands stayed in her mind. Her heart was heavy. She could not simply sit still and do nothing. Kate leaned slightly and spoke softly to her aide, seated nearby. "I want to go to him," she whispered. The aide looked surprised. This was not part of the plan. The royal family followed strict rules during such events. Unplanned actions could cause trouble, but the aide saw the steady look in Kate's eyes. She nodded gently. Kate waited for the right moment. Soon there was a pause in the ceremony. The choir finished a song. The audience shifted slightly in their seats. For a brief moment, the cameras pointed toward the altar. Away from the rows of guests, slowly and gracefully, Kate rose from her seat. The audience noticed her movement. All eyes turned toward the princess. A soft murmur moved through the crowd. With her head slightly lowered, Kate walked quietly down the aisle. Her navy blue dress flowed softly behind her. Her steps made no sound on the stone floor. People watched, wondering what she was doing. The king, too, turned his head slightly. Even the archbishop paused, his eyes following her. Kate reached the third row. She moved gently beside the old man. The man looked up, surprised. Tears still shone on his cheeks. Kate knelt down beside him. Her voice was soft and kind. "Are you all right, sir?" she asked gently. The old man's hands trembled as he lifted the small photo for her to see. It showed a young man in uniform, smiling proudly. "My son," the old man whispered, voice full of emotion. "He never came home." Kate's eyes filled with tears, her heart ached for the man's loss. Slowly, with great respect, she bowed her head deeply before him. The abbey fell silent. The audience watched with great feeling. Even the monarch, seated at the front, paused in awe. The cameras, though pointed elsewhere, soon caught sight of this moving moment. Kate placed a gentle hand on the old man's arm. She spoke softly, words that only he could hear. The man nodded, his eyes filled with gratitude. For those few moments, all formality faded. It was no longer just a royal event. It was a moment of pure compassion and human kindness. Then, As gracefully as she had come, Kate stood. Old man, a warm, gentle smile. Slowly, she returned to her seat. The audience remained silent, deeply touched. The ceremony continued, but now the atmosphere had changed. A simple act had reminded everyone that beyond titles and crowns, true honor came from the heart. The grand abbey remained still. The audience sat in quiet respect. The soft sound of the choir began again. The archbishop continued with the ceremony, but something in the air had changed. Princess Kate's simple act of kindness had touched every heart. Many guests now looked at the old man in the third row with new eyes. Some wiped their own tears. Others reached out to hold the hands of loved ones beside them. Kate sat back in her seat, her face calm but full of feeling. The king glanced at her with quiet pride. Other members of the royal family also looked toward her, moved by what they had seen. News cameras had captured the moment. Already reporters were speaking in hushed voices about the princess's gesture. Images of Kate kneeling beside the old man would soon be shared across the country and around the world. After the ceremony ended, the royal family rose. The king led the way out of the abbey. The veterans and guests stood and applauded, their claps full of emotion. Many eyes followed Kate as she walked past, her smile warm and gentle. Outside the abbey, crowds waited to greet the royal family. People cheered softly, waving their flags. But the moment that stayed in everyone's mind was the sight of the princess beside the old veteran. Later that day, the story spread quickly. Newspapers printed the photo of Kate bowing her head. News programs showed the video again and again. People spoke of her kindness, not just her beauty or title, but her heart. One news headline read, "A princess's compassion moves the nation." That evening, at a small private dinner, the king spoke softly to Kate. "You honored us all. Today," he said with a proud smile. Kate answered with simple words. It was what anyone should do. Meanwhile, the old man from the third row, Mr. Thomas Bradley, gave a short interview. He shared the story of his son, a young soldier lost many years ago in service to his country. Mr. Bradley had never been to such a grand royal event before. He had felt alone in his grief until the princess knelt beside him. "She made me feel seen," Mr. Bradley said, his voice full of emotion. "She honored my boy. I will never forget that." Across the country, many people felt inspired. Veterans wrote letters of thanks to the royal family. Families shared their own stories of love and loss. The princess's simple act had opened hearts and reminded people of the true meaning of honor. In the weeks that followed, the image of Kate bowing her head became part of the royal legacy. It was shared in schools, spoken of in churches, and remembered in homes. Not for the crown she wore, but for the kindness she showed. Years later, when people spoke of that royal ceremony at Westminster Abbey, they remembered the grand music, the shining medals, the proud veterans, but above all, they remembered a princess who lowered her head in deep respect for a grieving father. And in that simple, quiet moment, the world had seen not just a royal, but a true heart, one that would forever be part of the royal story.